In this episode, we talk about a medical center in Delhi which has come under the police spotlight for botched medical procedures. We also talk about the pleas to review the Supreme Court's same-sex marriage verdict. But first, we talk about something that could hamper India's reputation on a global scale. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Back in August, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had alleged that Canadian security agencies were probing credible allegations about a potential link between Indian government agents and the killing of the Khalistani separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Nijjar had been a Canadian citizen and was killed back in June. These allegations, which were made public in the Canadian Parliament, had led to a diplomatic standoff between India and Canada. But now, 2 months later, the Financial Times has reported that the US recently prevented a conspiracy to assassinate Khalistan separatist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun on American soil, and issued a warning to India's government over concerns it was involved in the plot. In this segment, we speak to Indian Express's diplomatic affairs editor Shubhajit Roy about the significance of this development. Shubhajit, to begin with and just to make things clear, could you talk about in what way is this development different from the allegations that Justin Trudeau made?
Simple difference is that in the Canada issue, Nijjar was killed, and here nobody has been killed. So that's the simple difference between the two incidents.
And what would you say is the biggest similarity here?
Well, the biggest similarity is that the thrust of the allegations is similar, is that the allegation is that India was involved in assassination of Nijjar killing, and here there was assassination plot to kill Gurpatwant Singh Pannun.
And Shubhajit, when Justin Trudeau had made these allegations, India had called them absurd and motivated. How has it reacted to the reports this time?
Well, it has been much more cooperative than it was with Canada. This time, it sort of acknowledged the fact that your side shared some inputs pertaining to the nexus between organized criminals, gun runners, terrorists, and others. And it said that these inputs were a cause of concern, and they decided to take necessary follow-up action. And it also said that India takes such input seriously since it impinges on its own national security interests as well. And the US inputs are already being examined by relevant departments. So this was the sort of what the Indian government's response has been to the US allegations of inputs of assassination plot to kill Gurpatwant Singh Pannun.
And Shubhajit, earlier this week, the National Investigation Agency had booked Pannu under UAPA after he allegedly threatened Air India and its passengers with a global blockade and closure of operations. And he had also released a video urging Sikhs not to fly via Air India after November 19, as their lives could be under threat. But for those who may not know, could you talk a little bit about him?
Pannu is one of the Khalistani separatists based out of US and Canada. He holds a dual citizenship. He runs this Sikhs for Justice, which is a separatist sort of group. He was listed as a terrorist in 2020, about 3 years ago, by the Indian government. And he's always made these pro-Khalistan statements, even inciting violence against Indian ambassador, Indian envoys, Indian diplomats in US, Canada, and other countries. He's been also sort of doing these robocalls for the last several years, advocating for Sikh separatism referendum for Khalistan as a state, as a country. So he operates from US and Canada and is sort of uses the freedom of speech, expression laws of these two liberal democracies to his advantage by making these statements, sweeping statements, which Indian government feels that are advocate violence, but the Canadian and US administration see it in a different way. So that's what he's been doing so far. In fact, his last statement about alerting or asking people not to fly Air India, be careful while flying Air India, was a sort of a nod or sort of towards the recalling the Kanishka bombing, which took place in the 80s, where more than 300 people were killed, most of them Canadian citizens. And that was seen by India as a provocative statement. But obviously, the US laws and Canadian laws view that differently.
And Shubhajit, the way India has responded to the US report, what do you think it says about the ties between the two countries and their power differential, especially when we compare it to Canada?
Yeah, you rightly said. The strategic relationship between India, US, and India, Canada are completely different. So that changes the dynamic of India's response as well in the face of these allegations, which, as I said, the thrust of the both the allegations are similar. And so India's response has been of much more of cooperation, much more of acknowledgement, and much more of seriousness. Whereas with Canada, it has been of rejection of the allegations, dismissive of those concerns, and non cooperation. So that's the sort of basic outlying difference between the two. We saw the US White House also now weighing in and saying that they see these allegations very, very seriously and would want the Indian government to cooperate and to find whoever is responsible. So, the attitude for India is very different when it comes to the US allegations and the US inputs in this case. And for Canada, India uses the word allegations.
And in what way do you think this affects India's image globally, especially considering the important strategic ties it shares with countries?
Well, obviously, this kind of behavior obviously has an impact on India's global reputation of rules-based global order, how India cooperates or in this kind of situation, whether there are state actors involved, and if there are such actors involved, then what India does. In government does. India's response was actually define how it is seen. So if it has to salvage its reputation, it has to act to the effectively and to the as convincing as a global rules based player.
And next we talk about a medical center in the south of Delhi which has come under the police scanner for allegedly botched up medical procedures.
This clinic is called Agarwal Medical Clinic. It's located in E Block in GK1 amidst all posh houses.
That's Indian Express's Arnabjit Sur, who reported on the clinic for the paper. And he says that this clinic began operating in 2009.
And mostly the facilities are starts from first aid to major surgeries, gallbladder surgeries, mostly stone surgeries, abortions, and other neurosurgeries and all related to the nerves and other complicated surgeries. And it used to get around mostly clients who were from the lower income group and at least 25 to 30 patients every day on a daily basis.
He says it used to be run by Dr. Neeraj Agarwal and his wife Dr. Pooja Agarwal along with two others. And here it's worth noting that despite overseeing the clinic, Neeraj and Pooja were not trained surgeons. The clinic employed only one surgeon, Dr. Jasprit Singh. Now, we are talking about this clinic today because earlier this month, the police arrested all the three doctors and a lab technician. This action was prompted by a complaint filed last month with the Delhi Medical Council by a woman whose husband, Asghar Ali, passed away due to a botched operation at the clinic.
So last November, Asghar Ali was suffering from this gallbladder stone for several months and years. So they came across Agarwal Medical Center from a few friends who referred them to the hospital saying that this is a good hospital, you can get treated there at a very reasonable cost. Because obviously, as everyone knows, AIIMS and Safdarjung, you have to wait for several days and months to get treated. So they were like, if not government hospital, let's go for this one. It seems like a decent enough place. So when they went there, obviously they were not that aware of what the procedure will be.
Ali's wife claims that her husband was promised that Dr. Jasprit Singh, the surgeon, would conduct the operation. However, shortly before the surgery, he was informed that another doctor, along with Dr. Agarwal, would be performing the procedure.
When the actual operation happened, Asghar Ali was in the OT for around 25 to 30 minutes. When he came out, he was bleeding from the mouth and there were other complications that came up, and eventually he was referred to Safdarjung Hospital where he was declared dead. So his family was like, what did this happen? How can a person die suddenly after being treated for something like gallbladder stone, which is not a very complicated surgery, obviously.
Now, it was later revealed that this apparent surgeon was actually the clinic's lab technician. And Arnab says that this information alarmed the Delhi Medical Council because, like mentioned earlier, neither Neeraj nor his wife Pooja are trained surgeons and therefore are not allowed to operate on patients.
They were not surgeons at all. They were duping people on the pretext that they were surgeons, and not even duping. They were basically, it was like a case of murder. So that's why the police came into the picture, that since they were duping and they were not surgeons, all of them were holding MBBS degree, except Jaspreet, who was a surgeon, but he didn't carry out any surgery. He was just a person they employed under whose name they used to sign, like they used to make random people sign. Random people in the sense that MBBS doctors and all, whoever they hired for the surgery, but there was not even a single surgeon involved in any of the surgeries that were conducted at the hospital since it was established.
Now, ever since the DMC forwarded this complaint to the police, a significant amount of information about this clinic has come to light, revealing that this was not the first complaint against them. In fact, Arnab says that about 12 years ago, Dr. Agarwal had forced the husband of a patient to pose as a doctor in the clinic.
So this was the case of Shashi Bhushan. So he wanted to get an abortion done of Rinku Bhushan, his wife, but these guys carried out an illegal abortion in 2011 around November, because it's only permissible before 20-week, this thing, they have a window, but they carried out after the 20-week window, which is illegal. So that happened to be an illegal abortion, and after this thing was done, she faced several complications. There was heavy profuse bleeding from her body parts, and that made him come back. So he got his wife treated on November 2011, and he came back on around 12 December same year, asking Neeraj Agarwal, telling Neeraj Agarwal that whatever the complications came up after the surgery that was conducted. So Neeraj Agarwal planned to carry out another surgery. So basically both these surgeries were carried out at a cost of around 7.5 lakhs, which he had to shell out somehow. He's a private driver. So a few patients were supposed to come in the following hours. So Shashi Bhushan was told by Neeraj Agarwal that if you pose as a doctor, I'll make you wear the doctor's robes, and you just have to attend to patients because there are not enough doctors right now. Your wife will get treated in a very good manner, and like I'll ensure high attention to your wife in the surgery. Initially, Shashi was like, I can't do this because I don't have any degree, and like I don't understand what the situation is. So he said, you just have to put on the robes and then not say anything, just pretend that you're a doctor. So he did attend to one patient, and one patient gave him 25,000 as surgery cost, and he kept it in the drawer. And then he eventually removed the robe, but he did have to pose as a doctor for one of the patients that came up, and since he was threatened by Neeraj Agarwal.
He says there are about 6 to 7 complaints filed with the Delhi Medical Council against this clinic. And these complainants allege that patients have died following surgeries performed by the doctors at the clinic.
So they had cancelled their licenses several times, they issued warnings, they formed disciplinary committees, and like they showed several red flags over the years, but this clinic still operated like under some pretext.
And this was actually a lapse on the part of the Delhi Medical Council, which failed to follow up on the case despite having cancelled their license several times.
Because they didn't come and like seize all the equipments and lock it up. That's why the Delhi police came up, because over the years, DMC used to form disciplinary committees and send questions to Neeraj Agarwal regarding why there was no this thing, like who were the surgeons involved, like naming them and all the details regarding the surgeries. But Neeraj Agarwal used to send a response saying that I don't remember the persons involved, and like he used to send vague clarifications, but there was no teeth to those, the DMC didn't act on its the warnings that it gave.
However, after the latest complaint by Asghar Ali's wife and the subsequent police case, the clinic is now completely shut. Arnab tells us about the events that transpired since the police investigation began.
So more cases are coming up of people with botched surgeries, victims are coming up. So police is in touch with DMC, and as these cases are coming up, it is sending the same to Delhi police, and Delhi police will accordingly lodge FIR in all these cases. The clinic has been seized. There are locks at the clinic, obviously. It's being searched, several illegal medicines, several banned medicines, several second-hand stretchers, beds, and OTs. Like basically the condition inside the center was very unhygienic, and several of these have been recovered from the OT. So police has been granted a 5 5-day custody of Pooja, Neeraj and Mahinder, the technician who used to pose as a surgeon. Jaspreet and Zulfikar, who is the quack in this case, was the middleman. They have been sent to judicial custody. They are in Tihar right now. Mahinder apparently has another center of the same kind that's being operated in Southeast Delhi somewhere, in Tughlaqabad or something, which police is also probing that, and they will carry out raids over the course of days. So the investigation is spreading, obviously, because there are a lot of links that need to be probed. So right now, since they are in police custody, there are a lot more things that will come up over the course of days.
And in the end, we talk about the same-sex marriage verdict. Last month, a 5-judge constitution bench headed by the Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, unanimously declined to recognize same-sex marriages. The judgment came as a major disappointment to the queer community, which had been demanding marriage equality along with the bouquet of rights that come with it, including those related to pension, gratuity, transferring property to one's spouse, and the right to adopt. Now, after this verdict, the petitioners had sought a review of the ruling, and yesterday requested the court to hear their plea in open court. Senior advocate Mukul Rohatgi, appearing for some of the petitioners, submitted before a bench presided by the Chief Justice of India, said that all the judges who delivered the verdict have agreed there is discrimination. If there is discrimination, there has to be some consequent result after that, unquote. He added that the lives of large numbers of people depend on this. The Chief Justice, upon hearing the counsel, said that he would take a call after seeing the petition regarding it. Now, immediately after the verdict last month, we had spoken to the petitioners and talked about why the verdict was such a letdown. We'll now play you a small excerpt from that episode. If you wish to listen to the full episode, including the analysis, you can find the link to it in today's show notes. Here's Uday Anand, one of the petitioners in the case.
It feels disappointing. It actually feels, I think one always expected that it was a difficult ask from the court. But it still feels worse than expected. The court has now conclusively said that, look, this is not the forum for this discussion, that this has to be decided in the playground of democracy. And, we thought we had to convince 5 judges of the Supreme Court, and now we have to convince 1 billion plus people that we deserve a life of dignity, and we deserve our rights.
Shortly after the verdict, we also heard from advocate Karuna Nandi, who argued from the petitioner's side, and she talked about how the burden has now shifted to the legislature and what the state governments can do to address some of the concerns of the queer community.
There were some opportunities today, I believe, that have been pushed off to the legislatures, and the central government has made their stand clear with regard to marriage. We hope that their committee will ensure that civil unions are recognized, and that the concomitants of marriage are then brought in to law, at least with regard to civil unions. But I will also say that the Congress and other governments in power in the states have many opportunities to bring into law the recognition of rights and the recognition, for example, of a partner's right to make medical decisions, because they can legislate on health, they can look at employment non-discrimination, they can look at, there's a lot that can be done. And if it is the legislature's responsibility, when the opposition parties speak, those that are in power in the state governments, let us not hear mere condemnation or any detraction from anyone else's position. Let us see affirmative work to protect the rights of all citizens.
Meanwhile, author and activist Sharif Rangnikar pointed out that while the court talked about dignity, love and choice, it was disappointing that the community has now been left in the hands of a government committee.
With no timeline stated as to when this committee should meet, how often it should meet, what are the parameters under which it should, what is the combination, how soon should they deliver. That kind of vagary leaves us, sort of nowhere. and it's worrisome and disappointing for the simple reason no government, and let's not hold the central government. We know the bureaucratic processes that we have in this country. We've seen in the case of Nalsa that it took years for the Nalsa judgment of the Supreme Court to be acted on.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, with help from Utsa, Sarmin, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.